who you bring along for the journey, especially early on, is so important. That'll make or break you. One wrong hiring move in your first five people can just kill you, especially if you're bootstrapping and you're in kind of that smaller size for a while.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study series. On today's episode, we have Steve Benson, who is the founder and CEO of Badger Maps, a leading software company based out of San Francisco that specializes in route optimization and territory management for field sales teams. With a career that spans major roles at IBM, Autonomy, and Google, where he was recognized as Google Enterprise's top performing sales rep globally, Steve brings deep expertise in sales and technology. He also leads Badger Sales University and hosts the Outside Sales Talk podcast, sharing his insights on sales efficiency and leadership, which is why we're excited to have him on the show. Steve, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm truly excited to be here.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine, Steve. There's a lot of really great stuff here that I'm excited to kind of dive into. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of things here, I'd love for you to maybe just share a little bit of your background, where you came from, who you are, how you landed as the founder and CEO of Badger Maps.
For sure. So I guess I'd like to say that I'm a creative genius, but I was working on mapping technology at Google, and I had a background in field sales. So making a mapping application for field salespeople was decidedly not creative genius. It was more just right place, right time. I understood the problem that salespeople faced, and I understood the technology and had worked closely with the mobile technology and the mapping technology that were kind of the major building blocks of creating a solution to help field salespeople be more effective in the field and connect with their CRM and collect data in an automated way. All these tools that we build for field salespeople in the field.
It seems like there was a kind of an intersection of all the hard work that you had and the opportunity kind of presenting itself where, hey, listen, there's this thing that we need, but it doesn't exist yet. And so you took the charge to kind of step up and pioneer something like this.
Yeah, and frankly, it was easier in those days, right? Like the iPhone was a new platform,
Hmm.
and all these APIs were kind of just coming together. Like when we started the company, you couldn't even deploy an application of this nature to the iPhone. It just didn't have the beef, and so you could only use our initial application on the iPad, which had more muscle. And then the next version of the iPhone came out, and you were able to use it. So we were kind of skating to where the puck was going, and so but it was a different era, 12 years ago than it is today, and we're still a small company. We have 92 employees now, about 5,000 customers.
It's nothing to shake a stick at. That's quite a significant growth. But the thing is, like I remember driving around in my 1998 Dodge Neon with my BlackBerry in hand and a text message of an address, and I'm flipping through my address book looking for in a real map. And then when iPhone came out with just a map capability with, GPS location, I remember I became one of the biggest advocates for my whole family taking on this new technology because of just how much it had transformed the way that I was doing things at the time.
Yeah,
And
so
so
powerful.
it's like, is that was kind of around the same era or the same time when you were like, oh, hey, there's an opportunity here, and you kind of jumped into it?
Yeah, it was pretty quickly after that. Like I was thinking about it a year later, and then I did it 2 years later, probably from there. So I started the company in 2012, and in 2008, it would have taken, depending on your speed, 3 to 5 minutes to load a map on your Berry, right? Like so,
It's a nightmare.
it was a different world, a couple of years later. So and things were, I remember there were all these posters up on the walls all over Google, like, what's the world going to be like? What's going to be possible when the internet's 100 times faster, when phones are 100 times stronger? Because they were trying to, get people thinking around the next corner. Um, so and I think there's a lesson there. I mean, we can think about the world the same way today. Like, what's going to be possible? It's like if when you think about, well, where are we in 4 years? Because things really have changed quickly, are still changing quickly. But that period, especially, just because we had these new platforms to publish software to, in particular around mobile, it opened up a lot of doors, and this was kind of an obvious one. These are people that work in the field, these salespeople. They're out and about meeting with their customers. They're important. They sell stuff. It's important where the revenue comes from. So if you can make them 20% better, it's really worth it to companies. And our stuff's not expensive. It's $69 a license per month. So it's really, you know, really a drop in the bucket compared to the cost of a field salesperson, and the value of making them sell 20% more, or helping them to sell 20% more.
Yeah, as Alex Hermosi would put it, it's an offer so good people feel stupid saying no to it.
Well, they just don't believe you when like, we've got this little spreadsheet we'll take people through, like, taking through their ROI, and they're like, no, I mean, we're not gonna get that much. We're like, I mean, this is what people tell us they get, man. Like, it's just or like, if you're doing it by hand, I promise they're just not doing it that well, and you're gonna save them a lot of time, and that's going to give them the ability to do more in a day. And if you give them the ability to do, and everyone underinvest in their field sales team because it's expensive, right? And so, they invariably, who are you making better? People that drive revenue. So it's always it pays for itself in the savings on the gas money, but the value is for sure. And magically you sell more when you free up a bunch of time for your sales guys.
To kind of look forward at what opportunities exist now, as you mentioned, the whole ecosystem is evolving so quickly. And I know, like, when I'm raising my son, what I think about is, like, I'm not raising him into the world that exists now, because the whole landscape is going to shift. And I'm going to use this as an example. When I was in high school, the only options you had were learn how to cook, learn how to become a mechanic, or learn how to be in the trades. And there was no other advanced opportunities. Keep in mind, this was like a tiny little town, population of 1,000. There was not a lot going on at that time. But fast forward 20 years, I never once would have guessed that I would have been hosting a remote podcast for a business as a part of a marketing engine. That never crossed my mind. And so it's cool to see this evolution of the technology, as the necessity changes, as our needs kind of grow. And being that
Yeah.
you were the founder, Steve, I imagine that you wore a lot of hats, as it were. And I wonder if you could talk to how your role has kind of evolved from, those early days, to, where you are now, and maybe how your experience at some of the bigger players helped shape the path that you took.
Well, I mean, right, day one, I'm in charge of everything, which, I'm not actually equipped to do. I don't code software. I'm not a product manager. I'm not a lot of things. So I did have broad enough business experience that I could do most things on the business side and wear most business hats. Um, and really the areas of expertise were sales, and some areas in marketing that I knew how to do. But um, that was so from day one, my role was to hire the people that were going to help build the business and were going to be able to do the things that I couldn't do. So the obvious first piece is hiring someone to actually start building something and proving out the concept. So
Right.
I did a really good job on that hire, and that person is still the CTO of the company. And there's power in that, right? Like, being together with finding great partners early on and picking who you're going to build with is important. So that was a key role and key hat that I wore early on. And then, a lot of my focus shifted to the customers, which I knew decently well because I'd done the job before that we were making a solution for. But I didn't just want my perspective. You want hundreds of perspectives, and so you can figure out where and I knew mine wasn't the perfect one because it wasn't tech. We weren't really building this for a technology field sales rep because they don't have that many meetings usually. Like if you're selling, software, you're not meeting with 25 people a week in person, right? You're meeting with two or three, even if you're in a field role, right?
Mm.
Um, so we were looking more. So I knew that it was more someone on the pharmaceutical companies or the med device companies, and so that was kind of the first place we were snooping around. And but I also wanted to meet a bunch of different field type roles so that I could understand where are the soft spots really, where should we build, where should we kind of verticalize to some degree. And that became my main role was to talk with those people, understand them, and it's a conversation over and over again, right? Like, hey, this is what we're doing. We're solving this problem. I think it's going to benefit your team, and you have to ask. You want them saying, "Yeah, I'm interested," but you have to ask, like, would you pay this much money if I get this to here? Would you pay this much money for it to solve this problem? And the asking them to pay for it part's important because no one's going to call your baby ugly, right? But if they're willing to put their money where if they're willing to put up money for it, and you can then go build the thing, and you've got a list of people to go back to, and not that all of them are going to give you money, but some percentage will because people aren't likely they generally don't say, yeah, no, I would, this is a big problem, I'd pay for this. Like it's easy for them to say, yeah, that's awesome that you're doing that, so cool, you're starting a company, yeah, that's a really interesting problem. It's different to be like, so would you pay this much for it if I finish this in 5 months and can give you a prototype of this product that will do X, Y, and Z. And so that became kind of my main role for the first several years, really, as it spread around, and then hiring people to support that and scale it and start taking it in different directions and actually marketing it instead of because that was much more of a direct, like reaching out directly to the exact ICP that I thought was the right person, which was easier to do at the time, right? I mean, you could just ping someone on LinkedIn and be like, hey, we're both connected to this guy, and I you know the I'd love. I think I'm doing something around here, and it seems like, and I'd love to get your feedback on it. Like this, so it was an easier time to reach out before everyone was writing AI emails that mention their mom. Like, I know your mom, Sally, from the beauty parlor, and like, you
Yeah.
know, um, but yeah, so that became my kind of my role evolved there, I guess, and then it's more of a sales and marketing management role, and dabbling in the product side to the degree you need someone early on with enough power in the organization to guide the product, even if they're not building the specs and being the actual product manager. You need someone with power who's talking to the customers, who can guide the direction, and tinker with, make sure you're not sailing five degrees off in the wrong direction. After a year, you'll be you're way off your mark, right? So constantly readjusting and figuring it, having feedback into what's most important and what people need.
Yeah, having that clarity on the product or the end goal or at least where the end zone is. So you have a target to keep aiming at. Well, and especially when you're kind of gathering so much data from other people to make a determination of whether or not this tool is going to be useful. I love how close, and I don't know if you are privy to this, but there's a guy by the name of Ryan Levesque who wrote a book called The Ask Method. And basically, in that book, he details how to take a product to market, but by reverse engineering it. And so, first going to the people that you're hoping to solve a problem for, saying, "Hey, what's the biggest problem that you're having with this problem or challenge or whatever?" And what would it look like if it were to be solved? And then, would you pay for it? And that's such an important distinction to make. Like, hey, look, I'm up to some cool stuff. Yeah, good for you, right? And that we feel good, but at the end of the day, it's not useful. And so when we come to that kind of crossroads of, okay, well, I'd made the thing, like, are you in? Oh no, I didn't need that thing. That thing was just something I thought was cool that you were doing it. So
Yeah.
having that as the foundation for it, it seems that I'm like the go to market method was to get whoever needed this thing involved. get them to help kind of, invest in it by being a customer. And then as it continued to evolve, I wonder how your marketing approach changed as that kind of, or as became more established. Like, do you still do that, or is it now we have a great product, we're doing a lot of outbound marketing and sales and all that?
Yeah, I mean, at some point, it's less. I mean, and I'm not. It's more you're telling the market who you are and what you do, rather than asking permission to find out if they're interested. And that's pretty early on. It's like that. It, you get more. It's better. You'll get a better response if you actually have the thing and they can sign up for a trial and use it, and you've got videos of it, and it's and you got references and it's real. You will get a higher response rate. Most people don't want to be guinea pigs. That's scary and that's risky and people don't like to do risky things. So
Right.
I think, it's you pretty early. It switches from, hey, if I did this, would you be interested in it? To, this is what we're doing. This is the value proposition. This is what you get from it. And I think that is something that people miss is the value of converting converting your messaging into something that is we're going to help you do this. This is the ROI that you're going to get from this. We're going to help you sell this much more, or we're going to help you save this much. But it's going to be you want to get through a conversation. You want to get to a dollar figure where they're like nodding their heads, like, yeah, we will save $80,000 or $800,000 if we do this. So it's and people, I don't know what the exact rule of thumb is, but I always feel like you're fair to ask for 10% of the value that you create in the world of tech. It's like the iPhone costs $1,000. Well, it's probably worth 10 grand to me. Like,
Right. It makes me that much money.
yeah, like it's pretty valuable. So your people are pretty comfortable. It's like it clears this is kind of a slam dunk. I'm not afraid to buy this. It's like, yeah, I'll pay that because but it's really hard to be like, if someone's like, yeah, I think I'll get $1,000 a year from this. It's hard to ask for $500 for that, right? Whereas if they're like, I think this is worth 10 grand to me, it's pretty easy to ask for 1,000.
So what's your approach then to kind of systemizing that sort of stuff? Because I know, like, yeah, there's obviously a transition in the messaging, and um, I would imagine it gets pretty obvious when it's time to implement new messaging. But then now you have to optimize that, systemize it, turn it into a process, in terms of like the actual customer acquisition. So what does that look like? Where are you kind of putting more of your effort into nowadays?
Our messaging, frankly, hasn't changed a ton over the years. I wouldn't say. I mean, I guess there's a few shifts. Like, during something like COVID, we needed to change our messaging from something like, "Hey, we'll help you do your routes better," right? Like, which I think is kind of common messaging that works in a good economy, right? Like, we're going to help you do better, and then your job is to figure out, well, how much better? What's the dollars worth? And you want to change your messaging to more something like, hey, we'll help you do more with less. And,
Mm.
then you're showing them, them being your prospects, obviously, like in terms of dollars, you're going to help them do more with less. Could be less money, less manpower, could be use less resources, be more efficient, whatever it is. But so we did shift our messaging a bit there. But in general, you know, messaging has been very similar. I mean, I guess, in good times, it would have been, we'll help you sell 20% more with your field sales team. And in bad times, it would have been, with Badger Maps, your outside sales team can generate the same revenue, even though your team might be 20% smaller. So subtle differences, but we're in the fortunate position that we never made any big pivots. So the thing that I started out with 5 problems in my mind that I wanted to solve, and I picked my favorite one, and that's still the only one I solved. So I guess maybe I solved 2 at this point, but like, um, and we've added a few different things that I wasn't thinking about at the time, but we never made a big pivot. Like we started out helping outside field salespeople, and that's who we help today. And with we if you take snapshots of what we were showing 12 years ago compared to today, it's just a more advanced version, really.
Okay. So walk me through then what that kind of customer experience map looks like. From like, if somebody has a problem, they need to find you. And when they find you, there are things that you share with them along the way to kind of help get them enrolled in the idea that you might be the solution to that problem. And then once they're there, like, is there a sales team that steps in? Or so, like, what does that kind of process look like for you guys?
Well, our go to market, I guess, early on, there's leads get followed from a bunch of places, right? I mean, and the biggest source is frankly word of mouth, right? Like just, and we're in a lucky, a fortunate position in that we sell to field salespeople, and field salespeople by nature are great communicators, and they're comfortable communicating. And so if you create something of value to them, they got friends, they got bosses, they got big mouths on them that are good at saying words good, and
Yeah.
so they tell people in the waiting, they run into another sales guy in the waiting room and they talk about it. Like they do spread the word if you impress them and make their lives better. And they change jobs a lot, which is great. And they don't like to be inefficient by nature. Salespeople tend to be really good at not wasting time because they get paid to be effective and focus on making money. Um, and so they, it once if someone's at a company and they're using us to build their route, figure out where their customers are, organize their day, and they switch jobs to another company, and they're like, "Here's your spreadsheet," and you kind of figure out what you're going to do on Google Maps, and figure it out. Run a report in the CRM. They're like, "Wait." So at my last company, we had something that attached to the CRM that showed all the stuff in the CRM on a map, and I got to build my route like this, and it was then I executed it, sent the data back, and this is how it worked. And there's no way I'm doing this by hand. So they'll push it into their new company, and so we that's one of our best go to market motions is just like you know these guys move around a lot, and as they do, we set them up on a new version. Like John goes from this laser company to that laser company, and we're like, "Hey, John, you want us to set you up in your new territory?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I do." And we set them up. And we're like, "Hey, who's running the CRM, or who's right in charge of sales operations? And can you intro us?" And they'll intro us. So that's one of their best is just referrals from happy customers. In terms of like traditional, more trad marketing, like we do SEO and SEM, and we tinker with ads. They tend to be pretty expensive. It's such a noisy world. Um, creating content that is super relevant to our specific group. I have a podcast that's specifically for field salespeople, which is cool. It's called Outside Sales Talk, and it's only interesting if you're an outside salesperson. But what we basically do is bring, and I would recommend this to anyone who's trying to go to market to a very specific group of people, is make a podcast for that very, very specific group of people. And in my case, it's I bring on experts because I only have so much to teach. I don't know that much about it. But I bring on top thought leaders and experts that you'd pay to come teach your company something in general. And I'll ask them, "Hey, teach the thing you teach about sales, for 10 grand to come teach a team. Teach it to these, teach them, come on my podcast. We're going to talk about it, but know that these guys are in field sales. It's a very specific group. They go and meet with 6 customers a day, face to face. This is, they're in their car, they're mobile. And so they kind of customize their message to that group of people, and so that group of people really like it. I think the podcast is more popular than it otherwise would be because, it's like my voice is made of honey and angels, but but um, I think because these guys are in the field, they love podcasts because they're driving around. So I think I think we get more listens than if I was making a podcast for dentists, right? Like just
Right,
because
right.
they are a group of people that eat podcasts up. So I think that was probably more useful for me than it would be to a lot of people, but that's a useful source. And we do a little bit at cold calling, a little bit of cold emailing, kind of, I guess account based marketing, I'd call it. Um, but so we experiment and try to dabble in lots of stuff, but the most leads come from someone typing Badger Maps into Google, and we don't usually know why they're typing it. Did their friend tell them about it? Was it their mom? Who told us? Or like who told them to look us up? But someone told them, and so they did. So that remains our best source of leads. But but yeah, so I guess that's the go to market story for us.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a really hands-on approach, Steve, when it comes to just having the right conversations with the right people. And it's, just lucky happenstance that your people are also people who have good conversations with other people. So that I think it really helps fuel, the momentum that you guys have achieved over the, last couple of decades or near a couple of decades here. But
Yeah. Is it a couple of decades already? Oh no.
yeah.
It's 12 years. It's 12 years. I'm a young man.
Yeah,
Ignore the
yeah.
gray in the beard.
Yeah. So when it comes to like really honing in that stuff, is that something that you guys like to keep in house? Do you collaborate with other teams? What does that look like?
Our marketing is in-house. There are times when there'll be expertise in something that we don't have expertise in that will bring in an expert. And sometimes that's on a long-term basis because it's like, hey, we have this need and you need a fair amount of expertise to do it. We don't have it in house, but it's not a full-time job. So we can try to hire someone that can do this with 25% of the time and also can do this with 25% of the time, or we can try to learn it, some on the existing team. But there are some things that are really hard, I think, that are best to be outsourced. Uh, that if you had a full time job of it and it was something hard and important, you should probably bring it in house. It's going to be cheaper. But if it's a part time role, like meaning it doesn't take. It's like a great example. Google Ads. They are really really hard to do well. That the thing Google's created a monster, right? Like, and they're
Yeah.
trying to make it easier, I think, and trying to boil it down and pick that money off the table. But it's a monster, right? Like I've tried to do it, and I've seen we tinkered around doing it in house. Sure enough, you outsource it to someone who really knows what they're doing, and they're spending 10% of their time on it, right? Because it doesn't change that much. At first, it was hard to like set it up and stuff. There's some heavy lifting there, but then it's just tinkering, adjusting, seeing what's performant, laying bets in the right parts of the table, right? And staying on top of things, knowing what's going on in the ecosystem and stuff. And so that's a good example of something that we've outsourced on a long term basis. Is just the Google Ads. Um, so yeah, and I guess some similar stuff on the tech side too, right? Like there's just you'll run into something. It's like, hey, we got to update these libraries, and it's just yeah, our engineers could do it, but like this guy, you can hire this guy from Upwork and he's done it, 80 times. He is the updater of this library. This is what he does. And
That's his
so,
thing.
yeah, and there and for every weird little thing, there's someone who's awesome at that little thing. And if it's an occasional thing, a perfect thing to bring in. I think it's really hard to outsource like your sales team, right? I think that's
Right.
tough. I think it's really hard to outsource your marketing team. Does that mean someone can't come in and who's awesome at optimizing and tinkering with landing pages or outbound emails or very specific skill couldn't set something up for you, and then either you're running it going forward or they're running it going forward depending on the thing.
Hmm.
No, I think you can that makes a ton of sense sometimes, but I think it's hard to outsource the whole motion for sure. That's a mistake I've made. I've seen people make.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, Steve, as we kind of come to an end of our time together here, I wonder if maybe we could look a little bit into the future. What are you aiming at? What are some of the big goals? What are you excited about that's coming down the pipeline for you?
Well, we kind of have, I guess there's two ways to go from where you're at our size, right? You start, well, well, I guess three ways. You can keep just solving the existing problem. If it's a big enough problem and you can, keep feeding the beast with just that problem, you keep doing it. You can look at solving it for more people, so expanding your TAM, because you're like, oh well, this group of people has this problem, and also this other group next, that's who we've been solving it for. Well, if we added this, that, and the other thing, all of a sudden we're helping this group too. So the TAM expansion approach, and then there's also the double down on the existing group and solve more problems for them. And that's kind of what we've been doing, is the double down approach, like do more for the same people. A little bit of TAM expansion, but really we've maintained focus on the outside salespeople. About 40% of our business at this point is field service people, but it's a group of it's the field service people that I say behave like field salespeople. Like there's a bunch of field service software out there, but there's a segment of it, that group, that there's a segment of salespeople that behave like service people and service people that behave like salespeople. And so
The weird
you
bridge
know,
there.
yeah, exactly. And it's really it's more about the workflow than the title, right? So if someone's needs to make decisions about who they're going to manage or who they're going to service or who they're going to sell to, and they're designing their day based on that judgment call, then we're often a really good fit for making them more efficient. If it's more like, hey, I've got 32 vans with 32 plumbers, and the different vans have different um, tools, or different vans have different the guys driving the vans have different skills, or the if the that we have different inventory, we have to determine where our plumbers are going, based on urgency. Is the bathtub overflowing right now? Okay, or is the sink just clogged? Like, we that's a different type of problem that we don't solve, but there's plenty of like field service softwares out there that are going after more of that problem.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Big goals. So, as we kind of wrap up here, I wonder if perhaps there is, if there's somebody out there kind of up to it, trying to create something, trying to um, provide solutions, building something. What advice would you be able to offer that person?
Um, any advice for someone who's just getting going? I think the most important thing to being successful is you're solving a real problem that saves people or makes people real money. I really prefer to solve problems that there's money associated with. I think it's an easier business. I mean, some of the biggest businesses of our time have obviously been, based on other things like ads, or where your user kind of is the product. But like I prefer to solve a problem that people are willing to pay to be solved. I think there's a lot of little problems out there. It's much more. You start going after huge problems, it gets real competitive, right? VC money comes in. A lot of competitors. The you know, but there's a lot of little problems that you can, 20,000 people have this problem and they're willing to pay for it to be solved, and their business is willing to pay for it to be solved. And those are my favorite kind of problems. So I guess that's the first piece of advice, is to solve a problem that people are willing to pay to have solved. I think there's a lot more. There can be a higher return on the eyeball type businesses, but I think there's also a higher failure rate. So risk adjusted, I'd solve a problem people put dollars in your pocket for. And the other thing that jumps to mind for me is who you bring along for the journey, especially early on, is so important. That'll make or break you. One wrong hiring move in your first five people can just kill you, especially if you're bootstrapping and you're in kind of that smaller size for a while. You really, that group is so important.
Yeah, the team that you build is becomes the foundation of the business that either succeeds and thrives or is constantly behind the gun trying to figure it out. So that's really, really great advice. Steve, if somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain further or perhaps work with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Easiest place to find me is LinkedIn, probably. If you look up Steve Benson, Badger Maps, you can't miss me. So,
You're easy to find. We'll
yeah.
make it even easier by linking to it in the show notes for anybody that's listening and watching. And on that note, if you wanted to get in touch with me and my team for any of your marketing needs, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us for this conversation, and I will see you in the next.